I need you to hear something before we begin. Most people walk past the moment that would have changed everything. They're in a hurry. They've got somewhere to be. They tell themselves someone else will handle it. And they spend the rest of their lives not knowing what they walked away from. This is a story about a woman who stopped, and everything that happened because she did. The hospital cafeteria at 6:47 a.m. is not a place where anything important is supposed to happen. It's fluorescent lights and lukewarm coffee and people who've been awake too long staring at nothing. The kind of place you pass through, not a place you stay. Nora Delacroix was staying. She'd been there since 6, sitting at the corner table by the window, the one with the wobbly leg that nobody ever fixed. 61 years old, black, wide-shouldered, with the kind of face that had earned its lines. She wore her cleaning uniform, dark green scrubs, a gray zip-up fleece with a bleach stain on the left cuff, and she had her breakfast in front of her, a hard-boiled egg, 2 slices of wheat toast, a black coffee from the machine that tasted like burnt rubber but cost 80 cents, which was the point. She'd worked the overnight floor at Hargrove Regional Medical Center for 19 years. Not as a doctor, not as a nurse, not even as a supervisor. She pushed a cart, she mopped floors, she replaced trash bags in rooms where people were dying and tried to do it quietly enough that nobody had to notice her. She was good at not being noticed. That morning she had 40 minutes before her shift technically ended, before she was 15 plus home, sleep 4 hours, and come back and do it again. She wasn't in a hurry. She never was. She ate her egg in small bites and watched the parking lot fill up through the window, the early arrivals in their good coats carrying coffee cups from places that cost 5 times what hers did. Then she heard it. A child crying. Not the fussy, tired crying that echoed through pediatrics at all hours. Something different, high and thin and frightened. Nora set down her toast. In the far corner of the cafeteria, half hidden behind a pillar, a little boy sat on the floor with his knees pulled to his chest. He looked about 7. He was wearing a dinosaur backpack that was too big for him, his sneakers were untied, and he was crying so hard his whole body shook. No adult near him. Not one. People walked by. A man in scrubs glanced over and kept going. A woman with a visitor badge checked her phone. A cafeteria worker pushing a mop looked at the boy for a moment, then looked at the clock on the wall and pushed the mop in the other direction. Nora stood up. She crossed the cafeteria, not fast, not slow, just steady, the way she did everything. She crouched down in front of the boy, low enough to be at his level, far enough not to crowd him. "Hey!" Her voice was quiet. "Hey, look at me. You're okay." He looked up. His eyes were red, his face blotchy, he had a small cut on his chin, the kind you get from a fall already dried. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Leo." It came out in pieces between sobs. "Leo, I'm Nora. I'm not going anywhere. Can you tell me what happened?" He shook his head first. Then the words came out in a rush, the way a child's words do when they've been holding them in too long. He'd come with his mom. She'd felt sick in the parking garage, the dizzy kind of sick, and she'd sat down on the ground and told him to go get help, go inside, find someone, and he'd run in, and he didn't know where she was anymore. And he'd asked 2 people, and they'd said they didn't work here, and he couldn't find her, and he was scared. "Okay," Nora said. "Okay. Your mom is in the parking garage?" Leo nodded. "Then that's where we're going." She held out her hand. He took it. She walked him back through the cafeteria and out the side door that connected to the garage, past the people who hadn't stopped, and she didn't look at any of them. She found the mother 3 rows in, sitting against a concrete pillar, conscious but pale, her hand pressed to her chest, 40-something, dark-haired, wearing a blazer and slacks that looked like they'd been slept in. "Ma'am!" Nora crouched down again, same voice, calm, steady. "I've got your son. He's right here." The woman's face collapsed with relief. "Leo." "I'm here, Mom." He went to her and held onto her arm. Nora looked at the woman's face and she knew that color. She'd seen it on the overnight floor too many times. She stood up and walked 2 rows over to the emergency call box on the garage wall and pressed it. Then she went back and sat on the cold concrete next to the woman and the boy and waited. What's your name? The woman asked while they waited. Nora, do you work here? 19 years. The woman looked at the bleach stain on Nora's fleece, at the green scrubs, at the cart lanyard still clipped to her pocket. Something moved across her face that Nora recognized and didn't bother naming. Thank you, the woman said. I mean it, don't thank me yet. Let's get you inside first. The paramedics came at 7:04. It was a cardiac event, minor, they said, but real. They got the woman onto a gurney. Leo held Nora's hand while they wheeled his mother inside. In the ER bay, a nurse appeared and took Leo gently by the shoulder. She looked at Nora. Are you family? Nora let go of Leo's hand. I found him in the cafeteria. His mom was in the garage. Leo turned and looked at her with the eyes of a child who has just understood that someone is leaving. Are you going to go? That landed somewhere in Nora's chest and stayed. I'll be just outside, she said. I won't leave the building. She sat in the ER waiting room for 2 hours. Still on the clock technically, but her supervisor had waved her off when Nora called from the garage. Take your time, Deb had said. I'll cover it. Deb had been saying that for 11 years. At 9:15, a man came through the ER doors walking fast. 50s, silver at the temples, wearing a suit jacket over an open-collar shirt, the kind of suit that doesn't come off a rack. He went straight to the desk. Nora watched him. He had the walk of someone who is used to rooms adjusting around him. The desk nurse pointed in Nora's direction. He crossed to her. You're the woman who found them? I found the boy first. His mother was in the garage. Is she stable, last I heard? They took her back around 7:10. He sat down in the chair next to Nora's, not across from her. Next to her. He put his elbows on his knees and pressed his hands together and stared at the floor for a moment. Leo's my nephew, he said. My sister's been dealing with a heart thing for a year. She knew she shouldn't be driving, but she had an appointment and he stopped. Reset. I got the call at 7:30. I was 45 minutes out. He's a brave kid, Nora said. He went and found help on his own. The man looked at her. His name, she didn't know yet, was Garrett Lowe, and he was 63 years old, and he had spent 31 years building a healthcare consulting firm that now operated in 12 states, and he was not a man who surprised easily. But something about this woman in the bleach-stained fleece, sitting calmly in a plastic ER chair 2 hours after her shift ended, holding a paper cup of cold coffee she hadn't thrown away. Something about her stopped him. How long have you been here? Since 7. He looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9:20. You waited. Leo asked me to. Garrett Lowe was quiet for a moment. Can I ask what you do here? Are you a nurse? I'm on the cleaning staff. He nodded, slowly. Not the dismissive nod. The other kind, the kind that means something just shifted. I'd like to do something for you, he said. To say thank you. That's not necessary. I know it's not necessary. I'd still like to. Nora looked at him with the steady eyes of a woman who had been offered things before and learned exactly how seriously to take them. Then make sure your sister eats something when she wakes up, she said. Hospital food is bad, but it's better than nothing. He almost smiled. I will, but I meant something for you. She stood up. I need to clock out. My bus is at 10:15. She picked up her purse, the canvas one, with the frayed strap she'd been meaning to replace for 2 years. Take care of that boy, mister. Lowe. Garrett Lowe. She nodded once and walked out. She didn't think about him on the bus home. She thought about Leo's face when she'd found him, the way he'd grabbed her hand and held on. She thought about the man with the mop who had looked at the boy and looked at the clock. She thought, I would do it again tomorrow. Then she went home, took off her shoes, and slept. 6 hours later, her phone rang, unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail. Miss Delacroix? Yes, this is Garrett Lowe. I apologize for tracking down your number. I spoke to your HR department. I hope that's not too forward. It was, a little. But his voice was careful. Careful in a way that meant he knew it. What can I do for you, Mr. Lowe? I'd like to meet with you if you're willing. At your convenience, your location, anywhere you're comfortable. I have a proposal I'd like to discuss. Nora sat on the edge of her bed in the apartment she'd lived in for 14 years. The one with the window that looked out onto a brick wall and the radiator that clanged every night at 2 a.m. like it had somewhere to be. What kind of proposal? The kind that's better explained in person. But I want to be clear. It's not charity. It's a business conversation. And if you say no, I will entirely respect that. She thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Saturday, she said. 10 a.m. the diner on Clement Street. The one with the blue awning. I'll be there. She hung up and stared at the brick wall outside her window for a long time. Then she went back to sleep. Saturday morning, she wore the same thing she'd have worn to church. Dark slacks, a burgundy blouse, her good coat, the camel-colored one she'd bought at a second-hand store 8 years ago and never had occasion to replace because she'd taken care of it. Her shoes were clean. Her hair was neat. She arrived at Tidfin 55. Garrett Lowe was already there, sitting in a booth with coffee and a legal pad. He stood when she walked in, which she noticed. They ordered. She got eggs and wheat toast. He got the same, without asking what she was having. He didn't open the legal pad for the first 20 minutes. Instead, he talked to her, not at her. Asked about the hospital, about the overnight shift, about what 19 years looked like from the inside of a building most people only came to in crisis. She answered in full sentences. She was not a woman who gave half answers. Then he opened the pad. I want to tell you what I do, he said. And then I want to tell you what I need. Garrett Lowe's firm, Lowe Healthcare Advisors, worked with regional hospital systems across the country on what he called operational dignity. The conditions that determined whether the people who worked the non-clinical side of hospitals, the people nobody photographed for newsletters, stayed long enough to matter. Turnover in hospital support staff, he said, was 40% annually in most systems. His firm had spent 6 years researching why. The answer was not pay, not primarily. It was the way people were treated, the way invisible work was made to feel even more invisible. His firm advised hospital leadership. He had 17 consultants. What he did not have, he said, was someone who had actually done the work. I have people who have studied the problem, he said. I don't have anyone who has lived inside it. I have data. I don't have the 19 years. Nora looked at him. You want to hire me. I want to offer you a consulting role. Part-time to start, if you want to keep your position at Hargrove. Full-time if you decide later that makes sense. The work would involve listening interviews, program evaluation, and sitting in rooms where decisions get made and telling us when we're wrong, telling you when you're wrong. That's the job. The title would be Senior Advisor for Workforce Experience. The compensation. He named a number that was more than Nora's annual salary at the hospital. Per quarter. She set her fork down. Mr. Lowe? Garrett. I don't have a degree. I have a GED and a certificate in facilities management and 19 years. I know. I asked HR for your file before I called. I read your performance evaluations, supervisor's comments. You've been asked 6 separate times across 4 different supervisors whether you'd be interested in a supervisory role. And I said no each time. You said no because the supervisory role came with a slight pay increase and twice the responsibility, and because, he looked at his notes, the people I work with deserve someone who will fight for them, and that position doesn't have the standing to do that. Nora was quiet. You said that to a supervisor, Garrett said, and they put it in your file and nobody followed up. That's exactly what my firm exists to correct. The eggs went cold. Neither of them touched them. Why me? Nora asked. You could find someone with credentials. I have. He leaned forward. Let me ask you something. Why did you wait 2 hours in that ER? You'd done what needed doing. Why stay? She thought about Leo's face. Because he asked me to. Right. Because a child asked you to. Garrett sat back. Do you know how many people would have made a different calculation in that moment? The shift was ending. It wasn't your problem anymore. Nobody would have blamed you. He paused. I need people in rooms with hospital leadership who make that calculation the right way without thinking about it. That's not a credential. That's a character. And it's the rarest thing I know how to look for. The diner was filling up. A family settled into the booth next to them. A baby banged a spoon. Nora picked up her coffee and wrapped both hands around it. "I'll need 2 weeks to think about it," she said. "Of course. And if I did yes, I won't leave the hospital until I've trained whoever takes my floor. I won't leave people short. I would expect nothing else." She looked at him for a long moment, the kind of look that measures something. "You looked me up," she said. "You read my file. You know what I make. Yes, so you know that what you're offering is life-changing." "Yes, I know." She nodded once. "Set down the coffee." 2 weeks, she said. She called in her notice 11 days later. But first she told Deb, who cried, which surprised Nora, and then Deb said she'd always known something like this would happen because the universe owed Nora Delacroix about 40 years of back pay, and she was glad it was finally getting around to it. She trained the woman who took her floor. 26 years old, recently immigrated, learning everything fast and needing someone to tell her it was all right to ask questions. Nora spent 3 days walking the halls with her and answering everyone. On her last night at Hargrove Regional, she clocked out at 6:58 a.m. She left her cart lined up the way she always did, supplies restocked, wheels straight. She took the lanyard off her key card and hung it on the hook inside the supply closet door. Then she walked through the cafeteria, the one with the fluorescent lights and the 80-cent coffee, and she stopped for a moment at the table by the window with the wobbly leg. She thought, nothing important is supposed to happen here. She smiled at that. Then she walked out. 3 months later, Nora Delacroix sat in a conference room on the 14th floor of a hospital system headquarters in suburban Ohio. Around the table, 7 administrators, 2 department heads, a VP of operations named Dale Whitfield, 52, who had the particular confidence of a man whose ideas had not been challenged in a long time. Nora had been introduced as senior advisor, low healthcare advisors. She wore dark slacks and a blazer she'd bought new, the first new professional clothing she'd purchased in 11 years. Dale Whitfield had looked at her when she walked in. Then he'd looked at Garrett, who was not in the room, and then back at the legal pad in front of him. He'd spoken to everyone in the room since the meeting started. He had not spoken to Nora. The presentation was 40 minutes of slides. Turnover rates, exit survey data, proposed intervention, a new recognition program, monthly newsletter features, an annual banquet. When it ended, Dale Whitfield looked around the table. Thoughts? Nora spoke first. "The people who are leaving aren't leaving because they don't feel recognized," she said. "They're leaving because they feel disposable. A newsletter doesn't fix that. A banquet doesn't fix it." She opened her folder. "I spoke to 41 current support staff members across your 3 facilities last month. They named 3 things consistently: inconsistent scheduling that makes childcare impossible, no clear path to advancement, and supervisors who have no accountability for how they speak to people." She looked up. "I have the transcripts, I have the data, and I have 19 years of experience on the other side of what you're describing." The room was quiet. Dale Whitfield's expression had shifted. Not to anger, not yet, to the particular blankness of a man recalibrating. "You've been in the field," he said, finally addressing her. 19 years on an overnight cleaning crew at a regional hospital, yes. He looked at his legal pad. It's anecdotal. We appreciate the perspective. It's 41 interviews, structured and coded, and I can put you in the room with the regional labor board data that confirms all of it." She closed the folder. "I'm not here to be a perspective. I'm here to tell you what the problem actually is so you can fix it." Something happened then. Slowly, around the table. People who'd been nodding along to Dale Whitfield started looking at Nora differently. The woman to her left, who hadn't spoken once, leaned forward. The conversation that followed lasted 90 minutes. Dale Whitfield spoke less and less. By the end, he was taking notes. Afterward, in the elevator, he caught up to her. "Mrs. Delacroix." He fell into step beside her, not combative. "Something smaller, that interview methodology, the structured coding. Did you develop that yourself?" "Garrett's team built the framework. I adapted it for this context." He nodded. It's good work. She didn't say thank you. She said, it'll work better if your supervisors know there are consequences for what happens to people on their floors. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll take that to the board. He did. She knew because Garrett called her 6 weeks later and told her the system had adopted every recommendation in her report. All of it, including the supervisor accountability structure, which had never made it out of committee in the 4 previous years anyone had tried. You want to tell me how you got Dale Whitfield to take that to the board? Garrett asked. I didn't flatter him and I didn't scare him, Nora said. I just made sure he understood what he was actually dealing with. That's the job. That's the job. She thought sometimes about the man with the mop, the one who'd seen Leo crying on the cafeteria floor and pushed the cart the other way. She didn't blame him. She understood it. She understood what it felt like to be running on empty at the end of a night shift with nobody watching and nothing to gain from stopping. She understood the weight of invisible work and the math of survival, the way you learn early to conserve yourself because nobody else will. That's exactly why she'd stopped. Because she'd learned that math too, and she'd decided a long time ago that she didn't want to be good at it. 1 year after she walked out of Hargrove Regional's cafeteria on a Saturday morning to meet Garrett Lowe for eggs and cold coffee, Nora Delacroix was named a senior partner at Lowe Healthcare Advisors. It was the first time the firm had created that title. She had a real office, actual walls, a door with her name on it in plain black letters, N. Delacroix. She kept the canvas purse with the frayed strap. She'd had it restitched at the shoe repair place near her apartment. The man who did it charged her $4 and told her the bag had good bones, just needed some attention. She thought that was about right. Leo came to visit the office once, with his mother, Garrett's sister, Diane, who was recovering well and had started cardiac rehab in April. Leo had turned 8. He walked into Nora's office and looked around with the seriousness of a person inspecting something important. This is yours? He said. It is. He nodded. He looked at the framed photo on her desk, an older woman with round glasses and a wide smile. Who's that? My mother. She passed 7 years ago. She looks nice. She was. Nora picked up the frame. She used to say the kindest thing you can do for someone is make sure they know they're not alone. She set it back down. She was right. She was right. Leo thought about this with the gravity that 8-year-olds sometimes bring to things adults have stopped noticing. That's what you did, he said. When I was crying, you made sure I knew. Nora looked at him for a moment. You're a smart kid, Leo. I know, he said without any ego. Just a fact, she laughed. For real, the kind that comes without warning. Leo sat down in the chair across from her desk and started explaining, at length, the differences between the Cretaceous and Jurassic periods, which apparently were often confused, and Nora listened to every word. I want you to sit with something before you go. Think about all the mornings you were in a hurry. All the times you walked through a space and didn't stop because you had somewhere to be, because it wasn't your problem, because someone else would handle it. And then think about what Nora Delacroix was doing at 6:47 on that morning. She wasn't doing anything noble. She wasn't angling for anything. She was just a woman eating a hard-boiled egg at the end of a 19-year overnight shift who heard a child crying and stood up. That's it. She stood up. And I know what you're thinking. That worked out for her because of luck, because Garrett Lowe happened to be there, because of a coincidence that doesn't happen in real life. But here's what I want you to understand. The reason it worked out for Nora was not the outcome. It was the 19 years of showing up as the kind of person who stands up. Garrett Lowe didn't trust her because she found Leo. He trusted her because when he looked at her, he could see the years of the decision made quietly, over and over, with nothing to gain and no one watching. Character isn't what you do when someone's looking. It's what you do at 6:47 a.m. in a fluorescent-lit cafeteria when you're tired and your shift is ending, and the easiest thing in the world is to finish your toast and catch your bus. If this story stayed with you, if Nora stayed with you, hit like, Drop a comment and share it with someone who needs to hear it this week. Subscribe to Dale's Stories. We're here every week with stories about real choices and what they cost and what they give back. And remember, the moment that changes everything rarely looks like a moment. It looks like a decision nobody will ever know you made, until the day they do.